The metallic tang of Clintor Prime's atmosphere filled Captain Lena Torrance's lungs as she pulled the visor of her helmet into place. The storm raged around her, bolts of electromagnetic energy arcing across the sky like vengeful gods taking aim. Her soldiers huddled in a makeshift trench, their expressions a mix of determination and dread. Above them, the Galactic Empire's shimmering energy shields flickered erratically, their once vaunted technology proving useless against the planet's unrelenting magnetic interference. "Captain," Corporal Dre said, gripping his rifle nervously. "The Empire's forward scouts are toast. Plasma rifles overloaded as soon as the storm peaked. There's sitting ducks out there." Lena smirked bitterly, checking the ammunition in her heavy machine gun. "Sitting ducks with an ego problem, Dre. Let's see if their pride holds up when they're staring down the Dravians." The crackle of the comm system interrupted her. The voice of Admiral Vericon, cold and clipped, rang through. "Earth unit, maintain your position. Reinforcements will handle the Dravian threat. Do not engage." Lena rolled her eyes. Translation: "Sit still and watch us die while the real soldiers take credit." Dre frowned. "We could hold. We have the gear. These storms don't affect our weapons. Exactly why they won't let us act." Lena muttered, her jaw tightening. "The Empire would rather lose than admit Earth's tech can do something theirs can't." Another arc of lightning split the sky, revealing a menacing silhouette on the horizon. Dravian forces, their metallic armor gleaming like the carapace of some nightmare creature, advanced in disciplined formation. Their rail guns, unaffected by the storms, gleamed ominously in the flickering light. "Contact!" one of the soldiers hissed, raising binoculars. 2 clicks out. "Infantry and armor." The comm buzzed again. "Maintain position. Reinforcements inbound." "Sure they are." Lena snapped. Switching off the comm, she turned to her soldiers, her voice cutting through the howling wind. "Listen up. The Empire's not coming for us, and you know it. But we didn't come all the way to this godforsaken rock to roll over and die, did we?" The squad's silence was heavy, but Lena saw the flicker of resolve in their eyes. "Here's the deal," she continued. "We've got one chance to make a stand. The Dravians think we're easy pickings. They think Earth's primitive trash isn't worth worrying about. Let's remind them what happens when they underestimate us." Dre hefted his rifle, his lips curling into a grin. "Hell yeah, Captain." Lena nodded. "All right. Positions. Prepare for suppressive fire. We hold this trench or die trying." The soldiers moved quickly, snapping into action. Ammunition belts were fed into the heavy machine guns, mortar launchers adjusted their angles, and rifles were checked one last time. Lena's fingers danced over the controls of her weapon, the weight of it a reassuring presence. As the Dravian forces drew closer, Lena raised her voice. "Remember, they think they've won already. Let's prove them wrong." The first Dravian railgun fired, its hypersonic round tearing through the ground mere feet from the trench. Dirt and debris rained down, but the soldiers held firm. Another round screamed through the air, this one smashing into a disabled Imperial hover tank behind them. Flames lit the sky as Lena's voice cut through the chaos. "Return fire! Make it count!" The trench erupted in a cacophony of noise. The rhythmic thudding of the heavy machine guns drowned out the storm as they spat streams of lead into the advancing Dravians. Mortar rounds soared overhead, exploding with precision among the enemy ranks. The Dravians' armor was thick, but it wasn't impervious. Kinetic rounds found their marks, punching through weak points and dropping soldiers in showers of sparks and blood. Lena's machine gun roared, its recoil vibrating through her arms as she mowed down wave after wave of enemies. Beside her, Dre cursed and cheered in equal measure, his rifle spitting bullets in rapid succession. "Keep it up!" Lena shouted. "They're not invincible!" But the Dravians weren't retreating. Their ranks closed like a well-oiled machine, their railguns continuing to fire with deadly precision. One of Lena's soldiers cried out as a round struck him, and he crumpled to the ground. Gritting her teeth, Lena fired harder, her voice hoarse as she barked orders. "Focus fire on the armor! Take out those railgun platforms!" The storm intensified, lightning casting eerie shadows across the battlefield. The Dravian tanks, hulking beasts of metal and firepower, rolled into view, their turrets swiveling toward the trench. "Mortars! Hit those tanks!" Lena yelled. The ground shook as the mortars launched, their payloads exploding against the tanks. One of the behemoths shuddered and stopped, smoke billowing from its engine. The soldiers roared in triumph, but it was short-lived. Another tank fired, the shell obliterating part of the trench and sending soldiers scrambling. Lena's mind raced. They couldn't hold out much longer. She toggled her comm, overriding the Empire's frequency. "This is Captain Lena Torrance, Earth Unit. Dravian forces are overwhelming us. If anyone out there actually cares, now's the time to prove it." Silence greeted her plea, and her stomach sank. She looked at her soldiers, battered but still fighting, and felt a surge of pride. If they were going down, they'd do it on their terms. A crackling voice broke through the static. "Earth Unit, this is Imperial Scout Squad Theta. We're pinned down a click south of your position. Your fire's giving us breathing room. Keep it up." Lena barked a laugh, the absurdity of the situation hitting her. "Glad we could help," she muttered, turning back to the fight. The Dravians were almost upon them now, their relentless advance unstoppable. Lena glanced at Dre, who met her gaze with grim determination. "Well, Dre," she said, reloading her gun. "It's been an honor." He grinned. "Let's make it a good last stand." The two of them opened fire together, their weapons roaring in defiance. The rest of the squad followed suit, their barrage intensifying as the Dravians closed in. And then, impossibly, the enemy faltered. One by one, the Dravians began to fall back, their disciplined ranks breaking into chaos. Lena blinked, her breath catching in her throat. "What the hell?" Dre muttered, lowering his rifle. A rumble echoed through the storm, and Lena's comm crackled again. "This is Imperial Heavy Assault Division. Reinforcements have arrived. Stay down." Lena watched in disbelief as Imperial gunships descended through the storm, their plasma cannons blazing. The Dravians scattered under the assault, retreating into the shadows. The trench fell silent, save for the ragged breathing of the survivors. Lena slumped against the wall, her gun slipping from her hands. She looked at Dre, who was grinning like a maniac. "Guess they decided we were worth saving after all," he said. Lena shook her head. "No. We saved ourselves. They just came to clean up." As the storm began to subside, Lena climbed out of the trench, surveying the battlefield. The bodies of Dravians and humans alike littered the ground, a testament to the brutal fight. She turned to her soldiers, her voice steady despite the exhaustion in her veins. "Remember this moment," she said. "Not because they'll tell the story, but because we'll live to tell it ourselves." The soldiers cheered weakly, their triumph hard-won. For the first time, Lena allowed herself a small smile. They had done the impossible, and the galaxy would never underestimate them again. The trench smelled of sweat, gunpowder, and blood, a grim cocktail that matched the grim expressions of the soldiers within. Lena wiped the grime from her face, her hands trembling slightly despite her best efforts to appear steady. The Dravian retreat had bought them precious moments, but she knew better than to celebrate. This was only a lull before the storm. She glanced at her squad, exhausted, bloodied, and clinging to their weapons like lifelines. They didn't look ready for another fight, but neither did she. That had never stopped her before. "Captain, reports say the Dravians are regrouping," Dre said, crouching beside her. His voice was tight, barely masking his fear. "They'll hit us harder next time." "They always do," Lena replied, her tone sharper than she intended. She softened, placing a hand on Dre's shoulder. "We'll hold. We've got no other choice." The radio crackled to life, pulling their attention. The voice of Admiral Vericon, cold and detached, came through. "Earth Unit, maintain your position. Reinforcements are en route. Do not deviate from Imperial strategy." Lena snatched the radio, her voice brimming with restrained anger. "With all due respect, Admiral, your strategy nearly got us killed." If we'd followed it to the letter, there wouldn't be anyone left to answer this call. You are under my command, Captain Torrance, Vericon snapped. I suggest you remember that. Hold your position and wait for orders. The line went dead. Lena exhaled sharply, fighting the urge to hurl the radio into the dirt. The soldiers around her exchanged uneasy glances, the tension palpable. Right, Lena said, forcing steel into her voice. Forget Vericon. He doesn't care if we make it out of this alive. But I do. So here's the plan, we're not sitting ducks. We're not waiting for reinforcements that may never come. We take the fight to them. Hit hard, hit fast, and make them think twice about coming back. Dre hesitated. You're talking about going out there? Into their territory? Yes, Lena said, her tone brooking no argument. They won't expect it. They think we're too scared, too broken to move. That's why it'll work. One of the younger soldiers, a wiry man barely out of his teens, spoke up. But Captain, what if they're waiting for us? What if it's a trap? Lena met his gaze, her expression firm but not unkind. Everything out here is a trap, soldier. We either spring it on our terms or die waiting for it to snap shut. You with me? The young man swallowed hard but nodded. One by one, the others followed suit. Dre gave her a grudging smile. You're insane, Captain. But I'd rather be insane than dead. Good answer, Lena said. Now let's gear up. We move in 5. The squad moved with practiced efficiency, checking weapons and securing what little ammunition they had left. Lena slung her heavy machine gun over her shoulder, the weight a familiar comfort. As they prepared, she mapped out their route on a battered hollow tablet, marking key choke points and fallback positions. It wasn't much of a plan, but it didn't have to be. It just had to work. The first step into no man's land was always the hardest. The air crackled with residual energy from the storms, the ground uneven and treacherous. The Dravian retreat had left behind scattered wreckage, a grim reminder of the battle they barely survived. Lena led the way, her eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of movement. Behind her, the squad moved in tense silence, their breaths shallow and measured. They reached the first choke point, a narrow pass flanked by jagged cliffs. Lena raised a fist, signaling the squad to halt. She motioned for Dre to join her. Scout ahead, she whispered. Make sure it's clear. Dre nodded, slipping into the shadows like a ghost. The seconds stretched into minutes, each one heavier than the last. Lena's grip tightened on her weapon, her senses on high alert. Finally, Dre reappeared, his expression grim. It's clear, but not for long. They're massing on the other side. Tanks, infantry, the works. Lena cursed under her breath. Then we don't have time to wait. Set up the mortars here. We'll use the pass to funnel them in. It'll give us the advantage. The squad moved quickly, setting up their makeshift defenses. Lena took a position at the center, her machine gun trained on the mouth of the pass. The first Dravian soldier appeared moments later, stepping cautiously into view. A single shot from Lena's weapon sent him sprawling, his armor useless against the kinetic force. That was all it took. The Dravians surged forward, their railguns blazing. The squad opened fire, their combined barrage turning the narrow pass into a killing field. Mortar rounds exploded overhead, sending debris raining down on the enemy ranks. The Dravians pressed on, their discipline unbroken even as their numbers dwindled. Hold the line! Lena shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos. She fired in controlled bursts, each shot precise and deadly. Her squad followed suit, their fear giving way to grim determination. A Dravian tank rumbled into view, its turrets swiveling toward their position. Mortars, focus on that tank! Lena ordered. The first round struck its tracks, halting its advance. The second round hit the turret, sending flames and shrapnel into the air. The squad cheered, but Lena silenced them with a sharp gesture. We're not done yet. Keep firing! The battle raged on, the Dravians throwing everything they had at the pass. But the squad held firm, their kinetic weapons proving more than a match for the enemy's advanced armor. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the Dravians began to falter. Their ranks broke, and they retreated into the shadows once more. Lena lowered her weapon, her arms trembling from the effort. Around her, the squad let out a collective sigh of relief. They were battered, bloody, but alive. "That was insane," Dre said, his voice tinged with awe. "But it worked." Lena managed a weary smile. "We're not dead yet, Corporal. That's a win in my book." The radio crackled to life again, and for once, it wasn't Admiral Vericon. The voice of an Imperial scout came through, filled with urgency. "Earth Unit, this is Theta Squad. Your actions just saved our flank. Reinforcements are on the way." Lena snorted, her exhaustion giving way to a wry grin. "About time." She turned to her squad, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. "We're not done fighting. But we've proved one thing today: Earth doesn't just survive. We win." The soldiers straightened, their pride renewed. They had faced impossible odds and emerged victorious. For the first time, Lena allowed herself to hope. Maybe, just maybe, they could make it out of this alive. The battlefield lay quiet for the first time in hours, the silence broken only by the distant rumble of retreating Dravian forces. Lena's squad sagged against the walls of the trench, their exhaustion evident in every movement. She crouched beside Dre, who was fumbling with a bent ammunition clip. He muttered a curse under his breath and tossed it aside. "Don't bother," she said, leaning her back against the dirt wall. "We've got maybe half a belt left for the machine gun, 2 mortar rounds, and whatever's rattling around in our rifles. Not exactly a surplus." Dre gave her a weak grin. "Never pegged you for the optimistic type, Captain. Optimism doesn't keep you alive. Planning does." She scanned the weary faces around her. "How's the squad holding up?" "Better than I'd expect," Dre replied. "They're scared, sure. But after that last push, I think they believe we might actually have a shot." Lena's lips twitched into a half-smile. "Good. Let's keep it that way." Her earpiece crackled, and the voice of an Imperial scout cut through. "Theta Squad to Earth Unit. Dravians are regrouping 3 clicks north of your position. Heavy reinforcements inbound. Estimate arrival within 20 minutes. She pressed the transmitter button. "Acknowledged. What's the Empire doing about it?" A pause. "They've ordered a fallback. But if they pull out, you're the only line left to protect this flank." Lena's jaw clenched. "Convenient. And reinforcements?" "Unknown. You're on your own for now." "Copy that." She released the transmitter and turned to her squad. "You heard the man. Dravians are coming back, and they're bringing friends. We've got 20 minutes to prepare." One of the younger soldiers, a wiry woman named Vargas, spoke up. "Captain, we're nearly out of ammo. How are we supposed to hold them off?" "With ingenuity," Lena replied, pushing herself to her feet. "We've held this trench before. We'll do it again. Gather what you can from the wreckage, ammo, weapons, anything usable. If it's not bolted down, it's ours now." The squad scattered, their exhaustion replaced by a grim determination. Lena turned to Dre. "We'll need something bigger to handle their armor. Got any bright ideas?" He scratched his head. "There's a downed Dravian tank about 50 meters out. Looks like it's still got its railgun intact, but the power core's fried." "We don't need the core," she said, her mind racing. "We just need the gun. Get me 2 volunteers and whatever tools we've got left. We're making ourselves a turret." Minutes later, Lena crouched beside the ruined tank, her hands slick with grease and grime as she worked to detach the railgun from its housing. Vargas and a burly soldier named Egan stood guard, their eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of movement. "This thing's a beast," Dre muttered, straining to loosen a bolt. "Are you sure we can even move it?" "We don't have to," Lena said, gritting her teeth as she wrenched a panel free. "We just need to make it fire. Once we get it mounted on the ridge, it'll cover the entire approach." As they worked, Lena's earpiece buzzed again. "Theta Squad to Earth Unit. Dravian advance confirmed. ETA 15 minutes. We're engaging skirmishers but can't hold for long. Understood, Lena replied, her voice steady. Do what you can. The railgun finally came loose with a groan of protesting metal. With Egan's brute strength and Vargas's guidance, they hauled it back to the trench, mounting it on a makeshift platform of sandbags and salvaged steel. Lena worked quickly, rewiring the firing mechanism and jury-rigging a power supply from an old Imperial drone. Will it work? Dre asked, wiping sweat from his brow. It'll work, Lena said, her confidence masking the knot in her stomach. It has to. The squad regrouped, their faces tense but resolute. Lena addressed them, her voice carrying over the rising wind. We're outnumbered, outgunned, and running on fumes. But that doesn't matter. What matters is that we hold this line. Not for the Empire, not for the glory, but because we don't quit. Not now, not ever. A ripple of determination passed through the squad. Dre stepped forward, grinning despite the odds. You heard the captain. Let's show these Dravian bastards what Earth trash can do. The first enemy appeared on the horizon moments later, a wave of infantry moving in precise formation. Lena manned the railgun, her fingers hovering over the makeshift controls. She waited, letting them come closer, her heart pounding in her chest. Steady, she murmured. Wait for it. When the Dravian tanks crested the ridge, she fired. The railgun roared to life, its kinetic slug streaking through the air and slamming into the lead tank. The explosion lit up the battlefield, and the squad erupted into cheers. Reload! Lena shouted, already adjusting her aim. The second shot took out a cluster of infantry, scattering their formation. The squad opened fire with rifles and mortars, their resolve unshakable. But the Dravians kept coming. A railgun round tore through the sandbags protecting Lena's position, sending her sprawling. Dre pulled her to her feet, his face pale but determined. They're flanking us! Vargas yelled, firing wildly at a group of advancing soldiers. Egan, cover the left! Dre, with me! Lena barked, grabbing her rifle and charging toward the breach. They fought side by side, their weapons blazing, every shot a desperate bid to hold the line. A Dravian soldier lunged at Lena, his blade glinting in the dim light. She sidestepped, driving her rifle butt into his face and finishing him with a shot to the chest. Dre grunted as he took down another, his movements sluggish but precise. The railgun fired again, this time striking a Dravian command vehicle. The enemy faltered, their advance slowing as chaos rippled through their ranks. Push them back! Lena shouted, rallying her squad. We've got them! The Dravians began to retreat, their disciplined formation collapsing under the relentless assault. The squad gave chase, driving them toward the ridge. When the last enemy disappeared into the storm, Lena lowered her weapon, her chest heaving. We did it, Vargas said, her voice tinged with disbelief. We actually did it. Lena nodded, her exhaustion catching up with her. For now. They'll be back. Dre clapped her on the shoulder, his grin as weary as it was genuine. Let them come. We'll be ready. As the squad regrouped, the radio crackled again. Theta squad to Earth unit. Reinforcements inbound. Hold your position. Lena smirked, leaning against the railgun. Tell them to bring more ammo, she said, her voice tinged with defiance. We're not done yet. Lena's hand gripped the cool metal of her rifle, her knuckles white with the tension that had settled deep into her bones. The sky above was darkening as another wave of Dravian reinforcements rumbled toward them, their massive war machines blotting out the few remaining stars. The air crackled with the weight of the storm, and Lena could feel the charge building in her veins, a mixture of adrenaline and raw, simmering anger. Captain, Dre called out, his voice strained. I've got movement on the left. Looks like they're bringing everything this time. Tanks, railguns, the whole damn arsenal. Lena didn't look up from her weapon. We've held worse, she said, her voice barely more than a growl. Hold your fire until they're in range. The tension was unbearable, each passing second feeling like an eternity. The weight of the situation pressed down on her chest, the thought of failure creeping into her mind. She pushed it aside, focusing on the task at hand. They had one chance to make this work. If they failed, the Empire would abandon them, and the Dravians would wipe them out. But Lena wasn't going to let that happen. Not today. 5 minutes until they hit us, Dre said, his face grim as he scanned the horizon. Let them come, Lena replied. We've got the advantage now. We know their tricks. A sharp bark of laughter came from Egan. Their tricks? We've barely scraped through the last few ambushes. I don't know about you, but I'm not in the mood for another suicide mission. Lena shot him a hard look. You'd rather sit here and wait for the Empire to save us? This is it. Either we win or we die. And I'll be damned if I'm dying on my knees. Egan nodded, but the fear in his eyes was palpable. He wasn't the only one. She could feel it. Every soldier in the trench was battling that same cold, creeping fear. But there was no time for doubt now. The first explosions rocked the earth as the Dravians' artillery began to fire. Lena's squad flinched, their hands gripping weapons tighter, their eyes locked on her. The blast sent debris flying, and the sound was deafening, but Lena stood firm, her feet planted firmly in the dirt. Stay down, stay low, Lena barked, moving to the side to check the newly fortified positions. Dre, set up the mortar launchers. We need to break their formation before they push us back. Egan, cover the left side. Vargas, get ready with the grenades. They moved like clockwork, their movements practiced and precise. Lena's mind raced, running through every scenario she had drilled into them. They couldn't afford mistakes. She couldn't afford mistakes. The Dravian tanks appeared on the horizon first, massive beasts of metal and death. Lena's pulse quickened, but she kept her breathing steady, focused. They had one advantage. This time, they were ready for them. She'd studied their tactics, their weaknesses. The Dravian tanks were formidable, but they had blind spots. And she'd learned to exploit them. Wait for it, Lena murmured, her finger poised over the trigger of her rifle. As the tanks drew closer, Lena's squad remained perfectly still, hidden by the cover of jagged rocks and debris. The first wave of Dravian infantry followed, moving in tight formations, their weapons at the ready. Now! Lena shouted, her voice rising above the chaos. The first mortar round launched, exploding in the midst of the Dravian infantry. The shockwave threw soldiers off their feet, and the sudden explosion sent them into disarray. Lena's machine gun opened up next, its heavy fire raking across the Dravian line. The kinetic rounds tore through their armored suits, dropping the soldiers in droves. But it wasn't enough. The Dravian tanks were still coming, their railguns charging, their enormous guns aimed directly at their position. Lena's heart raced as she ducked behind a rocky outcrop, her mind already calculating the next move. Vargas on me! Lena shouted. We've got to take down those railguns. Follow my lead. Vargas nodded, her face pale but determined. Together, they sprinted toward the left side, where a small group of Dravian soldiers had set up their own machine guns. The tanks were still advancing, but Lena's gut told her this was their best shot. If they could take out the support gunners, they might just have a chance to bring down the tanks. Lena's rifle spat fire, sending 2 Dravian soldiers to the ground in rapid succession. Vargas followed suit, her grenade launcher firing with precision. The explosion tore through the Dravian formation, sending a cloud of smoke and debris into the air. But the tanks were still advancing. Dre! Egan! Lena called, her voice tight with urgency. We need those tanks down now! Egan's voice crackled through her calm. Working on it, Captain. Just give us a few more seconds. Lena felt a twinge of panic, but she pushed it down. They didn't have time for hesitation. She'd seen this before, the moment where everything teetered on the edge, where the smallest mistake could cost them everything. The first tank fired, and Lena ducked, the blast tearing through the dirt where she had been standing just moments before. Dre! Now! She screamed, her heart pounding in her chest. Another explosion ripped through the air as Dre's mortars found their mark. The tank's turret exploded, sending a shockwave through the battlefield. The remaining tanks slowed, their drivers hesitating as the chaos of their own soldiers disintegrated before them. "Push! Now!" Lena bellowed, her voice fierce and commanding. The squad surged forward, their rifles blazing as they charged into the heart of the battle. The Dravians faltered, their cohesion shattered by the unexpected resistance. Lena's squad had the upper hand now, momentum was on their side. But they couldn't stop. Not yet. Lena fought through the adrenaline coursing through her body, each movement sharp and decisive. She spotted another tank, its crew scrambling to restore the gun. She didn't hesitate. A single, well-placed shot shattered the control panel, and the tank lurched, grinding to a halt. The battle raged on for what felt like an eternity. Lena's squad pushed forward, each soldier drawing strength from the others. The Dravians were being driven back, their numbers thinning as the survivors scrambled to retreat. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, the Dravian forces began to break. The remaining tanks turned and fled, their infantry scattering in disarray. Lena watched, her chest heaving, as the last of the enemy forces retreated into the chaos of the storm. She lowered her rifle, the weight of it in her hands suddenly feeling much heavier. The battle was over, but the victory tasted bittersweet. She turned to her squad, meeting each of their eyes. "We did it," she said, her voice raw. "We held the line." But she knew it wasn't over. Not yet. There would be more battles, more enemies to face. But for now, they had won. And that was enough.